Who am I?
You're safe with me.
Danger! Get down!
No, wait!
Seo-jun woke up with a bandaged head and no name, staring into the eyes of Han, a nurse who looked like an angel. He didn't know his own face, and he didn't know the dark tattoos on his chest meant he was the most feared Mafia boss in the city. He reached out to the only person he trusted, unaware that Han was the wife of Siwoo, the man who had just betrayed him and left him for dead. Every pill she gave him and every smile she shared was a secret trap set by his greatest enemy. The tension explodes when shadows move in the hallway and silenced pistols are aimed at his heart. Even without his memory, Seo-jun's body moves like a predator, lunging from the bed to shield the woman who was secretly sent to destroy him. In that moment, Han has to make a choice that will change everything. Will she follow Siwoo's orders to finish the job, or will she save the fallen lion who has no idea he is being guarded by a beautiful executioner? The rhythmic beep-beep-beep of the heart monitor felt like a hammer striking an anvil inside Seo-jun's skull. When his eyes finally flickered open, the world was a blur of sterile white and blinding fluorescent light. He tried to move, but a jagged bolt of pain flared in his abdomen, pinning him back against the stiff hospital sheets. His hand went instinctively to his head, encountering thick, coarse layers of gauze. "Don't try to sit up," a soft, steady voice commanded. Seo-jun turned his head slowly. A woman stood beside him, her face framed by a halo of light. She was dressed in a clean nurse's uniform, her expression a mask of professional calm. This was Han. As she leaned over to check his vitals, Seo-jun looked down at his own body. His hospital gown was half open, revealing a chest covered in dark, intricate ink. A massive dragon coiled around his ribs, its scale scarred by a long red incision that looked like a jagged lightning bolt. "The tattoos," Seo-jun rasped, his voice sounding like dry gravel. "Who am I?" Han's hands trembled for a split second as she adjusted his foredrip, but she quickly hid it by smoothing his blanket. "You were brought in 2 nights ago. You had no identification," she lied, her voice barely a whisper. Seo-jun looked at the ink again. The tattoos felt like a language he'd forgotten how to read, yet they hummed with a dark, violent energy. He ran a hand over his scarred skin, feeling the history of 1,000 battles he couldn't remember. He felt like a ghost trapped in a warrior's skin. He looked at Han, his eyes wide and searching. "Why can't I remember a single face? Why does my own name feel like a secret?" Han didn't meet his gaze. She kept her eyes on the monitor, watching the erratic spikes in his heart rate. Inside, her heart was thundering against her ribs. She knew exactly who he was. She had seen this man in the files her husband, Siwoo, kept locked in his private safe. This was the man her husband had spent years trying to erase from the earth. "It's the trauma," Han said, her voice shaking slightly as she wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. "Your mind is protecting you. Just rest, Seo-jun." She used his name, a name he hadn't given her. Seo-jun stiffened, his predator instincts flickering for a brief moment in the back of his foggy mind. He reached out, his large, callous hand wrapping around her small wrist. The grip wasn't violent, but it held the weight of a king. "How do you know my name?" he asked, his gaze narrowing. Han froze. The man she was supposed to help her husband destroy was staring right through her. She was the only thing standing between him and death. But as she looked into his lost, haunted eyes, she realized the monster she was told to fear looked more like a fallen king waiting for his crown. The drive back to the state felt like a descent into another world. Han gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned as white as her nursing scrubs. The weight of Seo-jun's hand on her wrist still lingered, a phantom pressure that made her skin prickle. He was awake. The man who shouldn't have survived was breathing, and he was under her care. The iron gates of the Siwoo mansion groaned open, revealing a fortress of glass and cold stone. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive cigars and the sharp, metallic tang of victory. Siwoo sat in his high-backed leather chair, a glass of vintage scotch in one hand and a cigar in the other. He looked like a man who had finally conquered the sun. "You're late," Siwoo said, his voice a low, smooth purr that usually made Haen's heart flutter. Tonight, it made her blood turn to ice. The shift ran long, Haen lied, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. There were complications with some patients. Siwoo stood up and walked toward her, the light catching the gold band on his finger, the twin to the one Haen wore. He pulled her into a possessive embrace, his silk suit rubbing against her uniform. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters tonight. The dragon is dead. Haen, Seo-jun is at the bottom of the river, and his empire is mine. The city finally belongs to us. He laughed, a dry, hollow sound that echoed off the marble walls. He began to describe the hit in detail. The way Seo-jun had been cornered, the number of bullets it took to bring him down, and the satisfaction of watching the king fall into the black water. He spoke about it with the casual tone of a man discussing a business merger, not a slaughter. Haen looked at her husband's face, really looking at him for the first time in years. The handsome features she had loved now seemed like a mask for something twisted. While Siwoo celebrated a death that hadn't happened, Haen saw the image of Seo-jun's lost, vulnerable eyes in the hospital bed. She saw the man who didn't even know his own name, let alone that he was a monster. She realized then that she wasn't just married to a powerful man. She was living with a butcher who enjoyed to kill. As Siwoo pressed a kiss to her forehead, a chilling thought took root in her mind. If he found out she was keeping his enemy alive, that same kiss would be a death sentence. Go change, Siwoo whispered, his eyes gleaming with a dark, triumphant fire. We're going out to celebrate our new life. Haen nodded and turned away, her fingers instinctively twisting her wedding ring. The gold felt like a shackle. She had been sent to be Siwoo's eyes and ears, his loyal wife in the world of medicine. But as she thought of the fallen lion waiting for her in room 402, she knew her loyalty was beginning to shift toward a man she was supposed to help bury. The hospital room was draped in the heavy, gray light of pre-dawn. Haen moved quietly, her footsteps muffled by the linoleum floor as she approached Seo-jun's bed. He was asleep, but it wasn't a peaceful rest. His eyelids flickered, and his breath came in short, jagged hitches, as if his mind was running through a labyrinth he couldn't escape. She reached out to adjust the bandage on his temple, her fingers barely skimming his skin. At that exact moment, a heavy metal food cart in the hallway collided with a doorframe, letting out a sharp, thunderous clang that echoed like a gunshot through the ward. Before Haen could blink, the man in the bed was gone, in a blur of motion too fast for the human eye to track. Seo-jun lunged upward, his large hand clamped around Haen's throat with the precision of a vice, and his other arm pinned her against the wall. His eyes weren't the lost, soulful eyes of the amnesiac she had cared for. They were the cold, obsidian depths of a killer. He didn't look at her. He looked through her, scanning the room for a threat that wasn't there. Where is he? Seo-jun growled, his voice a guttural snarl. Haen couldn't breathe. She clawed at his forearm, her face turning a frantic shade of red. The strength in his grip was terrifying, a testament to years of training and survival. Just as the darkness began to creep into the edges of her vision, Seo-jun's focus snapped. He looked down and saw Haen's terrified face, her small hands trembling against his tattooed skin. He let go instantly. Haen slumped to the floor, gasping for air and clutching her neck. Seo-jun backed away until he hit the far corner of the room, his own hands shaking as he stared at them in horror. The muscle memory had taken over, a ghost of his past life rising up to protect a man who no longer knew who he was. I almost killed you, he whispered, his voice cracking. He slumped onto the floor, burying his face in his hands. The dominant posture was gone, replaced by a crushing weight of guilt. What kind of man am I, Haen? What did I do before I woke up here? Haen remained on the floor, her throat stinging, watching him tremble. She saw the dragon on his chest and the raw power in his shoulders, but all she felt was a profound, aching sadness. He was a predator who hated his own claws. You're not that man anymore, she rasped, her voice hoarse. Seo-jun looked up, tears blurring his vision. But the body remembers. Hayan, the body knows how to hurt people. If I find out who I was, I don't think I'll be able to live with the truth. He was a lie and realized for the first time that he was covered in blood, and the realization was breaking him faster than any bullet ever could. The silence of the hospital corridor was broken by the sharp, persistent vibration of Hayan's phone. She stepped away from Seo-jun's door, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She recognized the rhythm of the ringtone. It was the private line she only used for her husband. Hayan! Siwoo's voice crackled to the receiver, cold and precise. There was no warmth of a husband greeting a wife. There was only the icy authority of a commander. I just received word from a mole in the city's emergency dispatch. A man was pulled from the river and taken to your hospital 2 nights ago. He's in room 402. Hayan felt the world tilt. She leaned against the cold white tiles of the wall to keep from collapsing. Siwoo, Listen to me carefully, he interrupted. He didn't know he was speaking to the very woman currently guarding that room. To him, she was simply his loyal asset inside the medical system. The man is a survivor of the ambush. He is the only loose end left in this city. If he wakes up, my empire is at risk. I cannot send my men in yet. The police are watching the entrances. Hayan's hand shook so violently she had to grip the phone with both hands. She looked through the small glass window of room 402. Inside, Seo-jun sat on the edge of the bed, his head bowed, looking like a broken man rather than a dangerous king. He looked so small, so lost. I need you to liquidate him, Hayan, Siwoo continued, his tone as casual as if he were ordering a drink. There's a potassium chloride vial in the emergency cabinet. Injected into his foreline. It will look like a heart attack brought on by his injuries. No one will double-check a dead John Doe. He has amnesia, Siwoo, Hayan whispered, her voice cracking. He doesn't even know who he is. He's not a threat to anyone. Everyone is a threat until they're on the ground. Siwoo snapped. Do it now. If that room isn't empty by the time the sun comes up, I will find someone else to do it. And you know how I deal with failure. Call me when the heart monitor flatlines. The line went dead. Hayan stared at the dark screen of her phone, the silence of the hallway suddenly feeling suffocating. She looked at the medicine cabinet at the end of the hall, then back at Seo-jun. She was a nurse. Her entire life was built on the promise to heal. But she was also a Mafia wife, bound by blood and fear to a man who saw lives as nothing more than ink on a ledger. She walked toward the cabinet, her movements mechanical. Her fingers brushed against the cool glass of the vial Siwoo had mentioned. One small injection, and her husband would be satisfied. Her life would go back to normal. But as she looked at the vial, she didn't see a solution. She saw the end of her soul. She realized that by killing the fallen lion, she would be becoming exactly like the monster who had ordered it. The cold glass of the vial bit into Hayan's palm as she stood at the threshold of room 402. The potassium chloride was a death sentence, a silent end to a man who didn't even remember his own crimes. She looked at Seo-jun. He was sitting up, his eyes fixed on the moon hanging outside the window, looking like a ghost waiting for the dawn to take him. Hayan didn't move toward the foreline. Instead, she turned her back to the security camera and dropped the lethal vial into the sharps container. Her hands were shaking, but her mind had never been clearer. She reached into her medical cart and pulled out a concentrated stimulant and a heavy-duty sedative she had requisitioned earlier. "Eat this," she whispered, handing him a small glucose tablet laced with the stimulant. "And put these on. Now." She tossed a bundle of navy blue scrubs and a janitor's cap onto the bed. Seo-jun looked at her, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What's happening? You said I needed rest." "If you stay here, you won't wake up tomorrow," Hayan said, her voice a sharp, urgent hiss. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket, a hand-drawn map of the hospital's basement service tunnels, and a set of keys to her personal car. "My husband is coming for you. He thinks you're dead, and I'm the one who was supposed to make it happen." Seo-jun stood up, his height dwarfing her in the small room. The stimulant was already kicking in, clearing the fog from his eyes and bringing a predatory sharpness back to his gaze. He looked at the map, then at Haein. "Your husband? Why are you doing this? Haein? You're betraying your own blood for a man who might be a monster." Haein looked at the wedding ring on her finger, the gold glinting mockingly under the fluorescent lights. "I know the monster my husband is," she said softly, her eyes filling with tears. "But I see the man you're trying to be. I'd rather bet on a stranger's soul than a killer's heart." She helped him into the oversized scrubs, hiding the dark tattoos that marked him as a target. Every second felt like an hour. She could almost hear Siwoo's footsteps echoing in the hallway, though she knew he was miles away. She was erasing the John Doe from the records, deleting the digital footprint of the man her husband wanted buried. As they reached the heavy steel door of the freight elevator, Haein pressed the keys into his hand. "The car is in the north lot, a silver sedan. Go to the address marked on the back of the map. It's a cabin my father owned. No one knows about it." Seo-jun paused, the elevator doors sliding open. He looked at the nurse who had just traded her life for his. For a moment, his memory flickered. Not a crime or a face, but a feeling of being hunted and finally finding a place to hide. "What happens to you when he finds out?" "I'll worry about that later," Haein lied, forcing a brave smile. "Just go. Seo-jun, run until you remember who you are." As the elevator descended, Haein stood alone in the dark hallway, her heart hammering. She had given him the gift of life, but she knew that by doing so, she had just signed her own death warrant. The rain hammered against the tin roof of the cabin, a relentless drumbeat that drowned out the sound of the world they had left behind. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of damp wood and antiseptic. The only light came from a single oil lamp on the bedside table, casting long, flickering shadows that danced across the peeling wallpaper. Seo-jun sat on the edge of the cot, his broad shoulders hunched. He had discarded the janitor's scrubs, leaving him in only his white undershirt. The tattoos on his arms seemed to writhe in the dim light, dragons and jagged thorns that told a story his mind still couldn't grasp. Haein knelt between his knees, her movements slow and deliberate as she peeled back the blood-soaked bandage from his side. "Hold your breath," she whispered. She dipped a cotton swab into a bowl of warm water, mixed with disinfectant. As she touched the raw, red skin around his stitches, Seo-jun's muscles coiled like a spring. He didn't pull away, but he let out a low, sharp hiss through his teeth. His hand instinctively reached out, gripping the wooden frame of the cot until it groaned under his strength. Haein worked with a focus that pushed her fear aside. She cleaned the wound with the practiced grace of a woman who had spent 1,000 nights in a trauma ward, but her heart was doing anything but working. Every time her fingers brushed against his warm skin, she felt a jolt of electricity that made her hands tremble. She wasn't just touching a patient anymore. She was touching the man who had cost her life. "You're good at this," Seo-jun said, his voice a low vibration, in the small room. Haein didn't look up. "I've spent 5 years fixing people. It's the only thing I know how to do." "But you aren't just fixing me," Seo-jun countered. He reached out, his large, callous hand gently catching her chin and forcing her to look up. His eyes were dark, searching, and filled with a confusing mix of gratitude and suspicion. "You're hiding me. You're lying to your husband. You're risking everything for a man you don't even know." Haein froze, the wet cotton swab poised in the air. The silence in the cabin became suffocating, broken only by the roar of the storm outside. "Why, Haein?" he asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous, intimate hum. "Why are you risking your life for a stranger who might be the monster everyone says he is?" Haein looked at the reflection of the lamp in his eyes. She thought of Siwoo's cold, calculated victory and the way his eyes never changed, even when he spoke of murder. Then she looked at the man before her, the king who had forgotten his crown but kept his soul. "Because for the first time in years," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain, I feel like I'm saving someone who actually wants to be saved. Seo-jun didn't let go of her chin. The air between them tightened, charged with a physical tension that made the distance between them feel like a battlefield. For a moment, the tattoos, the blood, and the betrayal didn't matter. There was only the nurse and the fallen king, hiding together in the dark. The oil lamp flickered as the wind rattled the cabin's loose shutters, casting dancing shadows across Seo-jun's broad back. Hae-in sat behind him, a fresh bowl of warm water at her side. To any other nurse, the ink covering his skin was just a sign of his criminal status, but as she wiped away the dried blood near his shoulder blade, her eyes began to trace the lines with professional precision. The tattoos were breathtakingly complex. A massive dragon arched across his spine, but its scales weren't uniform. Some were shaded with deep charcoal, while others were left as hollow outlines. As she followed the curve of the dragon's tail down toward his lower back, she noticed small, faint numbers hidden within the swirling patterns of the wind and clouds. "You're back," she whispered, her fingers hovering just above the skin. "These aren't just symbols of your rank, are they?" Seo-jun stiffened slightly at her touch. "I don't know. They feel like a weight I've carried forever, but I can't read the story they're trying to tell." Hae-in moved the lamp closer, the golden light revealing the truth. She saw a series of coordinates disguised as a dragon's claws. The clouds weren't just decorative. They formed the exact layout of the city's industrial district, with a specific warehouse marked by a tiny, barely visible scar tissue star. Her breath hitched. This wasn't art. It was a blueprint. It was a map to the dragon's hoard, the fabled secret vault that held the gold and the ledgers of the city's most powerful families. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Si-woo hadn't just been obsessed with killing Seo-jun to take his territory. He wanted this. He wanted the ink. If Si-woo had successfully killed Seo-jun, he would have had the body flayed to keep the skin as a map. Her husband didn't want a rival dead. He wanted a legacy that was etched into Seo-jun's very flesh. "He didn't just want you gone," Hae-in said, her voice trembling with a mixture of horror and clarity. "He wanted to own you. Even in death, he wanted to use you." Seo-jun turned his head, his jaw tight with a cold, rising fury. The amnesia still clouded his mind, but his predatory instincts were screaming. He looked at the reflection of his tattoos in the darkened window of the cabin. For the first time, he didn't see himself as a victim of a hit-and-run betrayal. He saw himself as a walking treasure chest, and the woman sitting behind him was the only person who knew the combination. "If he finds us," Seo-jun said, his voice dropping to a lethal, gravelly low, "he won't stop until he peels the skin from my bones. You aren't just hiding a man, Hae-in. You're hiding the key to the entire city." Hae-in looked at her hands, still damp with the water she used to clean him. She had intended to save a life, but she had accidentally stumbled into the center of a war. She realized now that Si-woo would never stop searching. He wouldn't rest until he held the map in his hands, even if he had to kill his own wife to get it. The rain had slowed to a steady, rhythmic dripping from the eaves, but the forest was too quiet. Seo-jun stood frozen in the center of the cabin, his head tilted like a wolf catching a scent. He didn't have his memories, but his skin crawled with a familiar electricity. The air had changed. "Get down," he whispered, his voice vibrating with sudden, sharp authority. Hae-in didn't ask why. She saw the change in his eyes. The lost, haunted look was gone, replaced by a terrifying, predatory focus. She slid behind the heavy oak table just as the first window shattered. A flashbang grenade skittered across the floor, but before it could detonate, Seo-jun lunged. He kicked the oil lamp, plunging the room into absolute, suffocating darkness. The grenade exploded in a blinding white burst, but Seo-jun was already a ghost in the shadows. Hae-in pressed her hands over her ears, her heart hammering against her ribs. She heard the heavy thud of boots on the porch and the splintering of the front door. These weren't just thugs. They were Si-woo's professional cleaners, moving with suppressed weapons and infrared goggles. In the pitch black, Seo-jun didn't need to see. He felt the displacement of air. He heard the hitch in a man's breath. He moved with a lethal, terrifying grace that didn't belong to a hospital patient. A muffled grunt echoed from the kitchen area, followed by the sickening crunch of bone. There was no gunfire, only the sound of a predator moving through the tall grass. Over there, a voice hissed from the doorway. A flashlight beam cut through the dark, sweeping frantically across the room. It landed on Seo-jun for a split second. He looked like a demon, his white undershirt stained with rain and old blood, the dragon on his arm appearing to breathe in the flickering light. Before the gunman could pull the trigger, Seo-jun was on him. He didn't use a weapon. He used his hands with precision that was ingrained in his very marrow. He twisted, struck, and the man fell like a suit of empty clothes. Hae-in watched from the floor, her eyes wide with a mix of horror and awe. This was the king her husband feared. This was the man the underworld called the dragon. Even without a name, his body remembered how to rule through violence. The last of the intruders scrambled backward, realized they weren't hunting a wounded man. They were trapped in a cage with a monster. Seo-jun didn't chase them. He stepped back into the deepest shadow near Hae-in, his chest heaving, his hands stained with fresh crimson. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was cold and jagged, but it held a protective wall around her. Hae-in shook her head, her breath coming in gasps. The silence returned to the cabin, heavier than before. Seo-jun stood guard in the center of the room, a ghost of the man he used to be. Finally realizing that no matter how much he wanted to be a good man, his past was written in the blood on his knuckles. The cabin smelled of ozone and iron. Seo-jun stood in the center of the room, his knuckles throbbing with a dull, rhythmic ache. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, hollow void. He looked down at the men he had just broken. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a weapon that had been unsheathed after a long sleep. Hae-in was huddled near the fireplace, her hands trembling as she tried to wipe the dust from her face. In the chaos, her phone had slid across the floor, coming to rest near Seo-jun's bare feet. The screen lit up, cutting through the gloom of the darkened room. One missed call. Husband. Seo-jun picked up the device. He didn't mean to pry, but his thumb brushed the screen, unlocking it. A photo appeared on the display, a high-resolution image of Hae-in smiling, her eyes bright with a happiness he hadn't seen in the hospital. Beside her stood a man in a charcoal gray suit. He was handsome, with a sharp jawline and eyes that looked like cold glass. It was Siwoo. The moment Seo-jun saw that face, the world began to tilt. A high-pitched ringing erupted in his ears, drowning out the sound of the falling rain. It felt as if a dam had burst inside his skull. A jagged flash of white light blinded him, followed by a torrent of images that hit him with the force of a physical blow. He saw the rainy pier. He heard the roar of the river. He saw the muzzle flash of a gun held by the man in the photo. He felt the cold betrayal of a brother in arms turning his back on a decade of loyalty. The names, the faces, the ledgers, and the deaths. Everything he'd forgotten came rushing back in a violent, bloody flood. "Seo-jun?" Hae-in's voice sounded miles away. He didn't answer. He collapsed onto his knees, clutching his head as a migraine tore through his brain like a serrated blade. He wasn't just a man with tattoos anymore. He was the king of the North. He was a man who had ordered executions and built an empire on the bones of his rivals. And the man who had tried to take it all, the man who had left him to rot in the river, was the man Hae-in went home to every night. The mirror of his amnesia shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. He looked up at Hae-in, but he didn't see a savior anymore. He saw the wife of his murderer. His eyes, once soft and searching, turned as hard as the obsidian they had been before the trauma. "His name is Siwoo," Seo-jun said, his voice no longer raspy or confused. It was the deep, resonant baritone of a man who commanded legions. He stood up slowly, the physical pain in his side forgotten. "And you are his wife." Hae-in backed away, her heart stopping at the change in his tone. The fallen lion was gone. The king had returned, and he was looking at her like she was the next target on his list. The air in the cabin turned freezing, more bitter than the storm outside. Seo-jun didn't move like a patient anymore. He moved like a shadow. In one heartbeat, he was across the room. In the next, he had hand pinned against a rough wooden wall, a serrated kitchen knife pressed firmly against the soft skin of her throat. Every smile, every gentle touch. Seo-jun hissed, his voice a lethal blade of sound. Was it all part of the script, Han? Did he send his wife to play the angel because he knew I'd be weak for a pretty face? Han gasped, her back pressed hard against the splintering wood. The man holding the knife wasn't the lost soul who had looked at her with gratitude just an hour ago. His eyes were cold, calculating, and filled with the dark history of Mafia king. The warmth had vanished, replaced by the iron-fisted ruthlessness that had made his name a legend in the underworld. Seo-jun, listen to me, she managed to whisper, though the edge of the knife bit into her skin with every breath. I didn't know it was you until I saw the tattoos in the light. Liars always have a story, he growled, pressing the blade a fraction harder. I remember the pier now. I remember the cold water. I remember Si-woo standing over me, laughing while he took everything I built. And you? You're the woman who sleeps beside him while he counts my blood money. The betrayal felt like a fresh wound, deeper than any bullet hole. Seo-jun saw the map on his own back through his mind's eye, the legacy Si-woo wanted to steal. He realized that if he hadn't woken up, Han might have been the one to deliver his flayed skin to her husband as a trophy. The thought made his blood boil with savage, righteous fury. Han didn't fight back. She didn't claw at his arms or scream. She simply looked into his eyes, her own filling with tears that were raw and real. If I wanted you dead, you would have died in room 402. I had the vial in my hand. Seo-jun, I threw it away. I betrayed my husband to keep your heart beating. Does that look like a trap to you? The conviction in her voice made the hand holding the knife waver. Seo-jun searched her face, looking for the flicker of a hidden motive, the telltale twitch of a Mafia spy. But all he saw was a woman who had walked into the fire for a man who was supposed to be her enemy. The king was back, and his wrath was a hurricane. But as he looked at the nurse, he felt a flicker of the man she had believed he could be. He didn't lower the knife, but the pressure eased. He was a predator again, and in this world, trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, especially when the person he wanted to trust belonged to the man he had to kill. The knife trembled against Haen's throat, but she didn't flinch. She looked directly into Seo-jun's cold, lethal eyes. You think I'm a trophy? You think I'm his partner? She whispered, her voice cracked with a pain that was sharper than his blade. I was a prisoner long before you arrived in my ward. Si-woo doesn't love me. He owns me. I stayed because for one night, helping you made me feel like I wasn't just a shadow in his house. I saved you because I wanted to save myself. Seo-jun's grip loosened. The raw honesty in her eyes was a weapon he wasn't prepared for. He had spent his life fighting men who lied for power, but he had never met a woman who told the truth to die. Before he could pull the knife away, a sudden, blinding spotlight cut through the cabin's windows, turning the rainy dark into a harsh, artificial day. A megaphone crackled, the sound tearing through the silence. Haen, step away from him. It was Si-woo's voice. It wasn't the voice of a worried husband. It was the roar of a man reclaiming lost property. Outside, the forest was crawling with black-clad soldiers. The red dots of laser sights danced across the cabin walls, searching for a target. The front door was kicked open, hanging by a single hinge. Si-woo stepped into the light, his polished shoes clicking on the bloody floorboards. He looked at the bodies of his fallen men, then at Seo-jun, and finally at Han. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. He tossed a chrome-plated pistol onto the floor. It skidded across the wood, stopping at Haen's feet. You played the hero long enough, Han, Si-woo said, his voice smooth and terrifying. I know you smuggled him out. I know you've been tending to his wounds. But I'm a merciful man. Pick up the gun. Put a bullet in his head, and we'll go home. I'll forget you ever crossed me. Seo-jun stood tall, his hand dropping the kitchen knife. He looked at the pistol, then at the woman who had held his hand in the dark. He was a king who had just regained his memory, but he knew he was outnumbered and outgunned. His life was no longer in his own hands. It was in hers. Choose, Han. Siwoo pressured, stepping closer. Kill the monster who would have murdered you if he'd remembered his name an hour sooner. Kill him and come back to the life I gave you. Or stay with him and die like a dog in the dirt. Han looked at the gun. She looked at the man she had married, whose heart was made of stone. Then she looked at Seo-jun, the monster who had just held a knife to her throat, but whose eyes now held a silent, tragic understanding. She reached down, and her fingers closed around the cold metal of the grip. Haen's fingers closed around the cold, heavy steel of the pistol. The weight of it felt like the weight of her entire life. Every lie she had told to survive Siwoo, and every hope she had felt while nursing Seo-jun. Siwoo stood tall, a smug smile tugging at his lips, confident that his wife would choose the safety of his gilded cage over the uncertainty of a grave. Seo-jun didn't move. He stood like a statue, his eyes fixed on Han. He didn't beg for his life, nor did he try to fight. He simply waited. He was a king who had just regained his kingdom in his mind, but he was willing to let it all go if it meant seeing Han's true heart. "Do it, Han," Siwoo commanded, his voice growing impatient. "Kill him, and we can put this mess behind us. I'll buy you that clinic you always wanted. We can start over." Han slowly raised the gun. The laser sights from the men outside danced across her white uniform, looking like droplets of blood. She pointed the barrel at Seo-jun's chest, right where the dragon's head was tattooed over his heart. Her finger tightened on the trigger. "I'm sorry, Seo-jun," she whispered. A sharp, deafening crack echoed through the cabin. But Seo-jun didn't fall. Instead, the spotlight from outside shattered into 1,000 pieces, plunging the room into chaotic darkness. Han hadn't shot the king. She had shot the light. In the sudden blackness, the lion's mercy became a lion's wrath. Seo-jun moved like a blur, his memory providing him with the tactical layout of the room. He didn't kill Siwoo's men. He moved past them with lethal speed, using confusion to disarm the two closest soldiers. "Han, move!" Seo-jun roared. He grabbed Siwoo by the throat, the same way he had gripped the kitchen knife moments before. But this time there was no hesitation. He didn't kill him, not yet. He dragged the gasping traitor into the light of the dying fire. Seo-jun looked at the man who had stolen his life, and then at the woman who had saved it. "I was going to burn this city to the ground to find you, Siwoo," Seo-jun said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, calm register. "But your wife showed me something I forgot existed. She showed me mercy." Seo-jun shoved Siwoo toward his own men, who were now frozen, unsure of who to shoot. "Take him. Tell the families the dragon is back. Tell them the debt is paid because of her." He turned to Han, reaching out a hand that was no longer shaking. He didn't offer her a throne or a ring. He offered her a choice. "I'm going to take back what belongs to me. It will be bloody and it will be loud. You can go to the airport, or you can come with me and help me rebuild something better." Han looked at her husband, who was crawling away in shame, and then at the king who had spared his enemy for her sake. She dropped the gun and took Seo-jun's hand. The nurse was gone. The enemy's wife was gone. As they stepped out into the rain, the city began to tremble. The king had his crown back, and this time he had a queen who knew exactly how to heal the wounds he would leave behind.